Hi, this is Neil. Welcome to Article Reading for Juniors. Today, we're going to read this article about being an African in the United States, about a guy who comes from Africa to America and has some experiences that make him think certain things, like what do Americans think about Africans, and also what do Africans think about America, and are those stereotypes correct? First, we'll look at question number 1. By reading the first paragraph, we can guess that the author of this passage is what? So, what do we know about the author from the first paragraph? Well, it says the first week in the United States, so that tells us that this writer is someone who's not from the United States. So, an immigrant. I went to lunch with students, and we talked about hometowns, dorm choices, and majors, which are all things that students talk about when they first meet. So you could probably say that the author is a guy who came to the United States from somewhere else to be a student. From later in the paragraph, it says that he's from Zimbabwe, and then it says he's an African. Zimbabwe is a country in Africa, so we could say the best answer is something like it's about a student who comes from Africa to study in America. That's your answer. Look at A. A person working to bring the internet to Zimbabwe. The passage does mention Zimbabwe, but does that fit our prediction? Someone who came from Africa to study in America? No. So that's not the answer. What about B? An African student studying in the United States. That sounds about right, so I'd choose B. I'm going to look at C and D though, just to be sure. C. An American student studying in Zimbabwe. That's backwards. It's a student from Zimbabwe studying in America. So get rid of C. And then Girl X. Girl X is a character in that first paragraph, but Girl X is someone who has incorrect ideas about Africa. And therefore, Girl X is not the African who wrote the article. So get rid of D too. Next, we'll look at question number 6, all the way down here. When the author asks, how else but on an airplane, on lines 31 through 32, his tone is mostly one of blank. So always change it to a question. What is the author's tone when he asks that question on lines 31 through 32? Scroll down to those lines. You have to read more than just that to get the tone, probably. Look at line 30. We'll start there. I've had Americans ask me the most bewildering questions. Bewildering means confusing. How did you get here? They ask me. How else but on an airplane? Did you live in a real house back in Africa? Do they think I lived in an imaginary house? Do people have cars in Africa? How come you speak such good English? All of these questions that Americans are asking him, he thinks they're really stupid questions, and he's confused why people would ask them, because they seem so stupid to him. I mean, the first one, how else but on an airplane? Like, how else do people travel around the world? So he's kind of surprised, he's bewildered at how clueless these questions are. Look at your answer choices. A. Amazement over how stupid some people can be. Now we said he's bewildered at how clueless the questions are, but that sounds like a pretty good match with our prediction. B. Amazement over how wonderful modern transportation is. He's not amazed by modern transportation, but how stupid the questions are. Get rid of B. Haughtiness and cruelty. Haughtiness means you think you're better than other people, and cruelty means you enjoy being mean to other people. So that's probably not what you're looking for here. He doesn't sound like he's enjoying being mean and feeling like he's better than others, but that he's confused why these people would ask these stupid questions. Get rid of C. Hope for Africa's future. That makes no sense. It has nothing to do with the future of Africa, just how stupid Americans are. Get rid of D. And the last one we'll look at is question 7. Right here. In the paragraph on lines 44 through 50, the author strongly suggests that Africa, what? Always change it to a question. So what does the author suggest about Africa in lines 44 through 50? Let's go there. Right here. That last statement is emblematic of what's wrong with how people outside Africa view Africans, as helpless targets for charity. Yes, Africa has dire problems, such as poverty and hunger, but to reduce a whole continent to a one-line narrative that begins and ends with malnutrition is unhelpful. It's high time the world moves beyond these dated stories and changes the way it treats African people. This paragraph seems to be saying that Africans aren't as helpless as Americans think they are, or Africans are more complicated because their story doesn't begin and end with malnutrition. There's more to the story. So the answer is going to be something like, there's more to the story about Africa. It's not as simple as Americans think. Look at A. Africa has an amazing tradition of storytelling. That doesn't sound like anything in that paragraph, so just get rid of that. Africa has few problems. He never says that Africa doesn't have problems. Actually, on line 46, Africa has dire problems, which means really bad problems. So B is wrong. What about C? Africa is helpless without America's help. No, it says that Americans have a very simplistic view about Africa. Not that Africa needs America's help or it's helpless. Get rid of C. And the last one. Africa is more complex than most Americans think. Now that's more or less exactly what we predicted, which is that Americans have a very simplistic idea about Africa. So if our ideas are simplistic, that means that the reality is more complex. And D is the right answer. Click it, you know it's right, and you can move forward. If you have any more questions, click on the forum link at the bottom of the page and send in a message to the people who wrote the questions. They'll be happy to answer them. There's also a tutorial with the correct answers after you take your quiz, which you can read over. And finally, you can send an email through readingcare.com. I had a great time talking with you about this article, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Have a good night.